2 of 110 million US dollars. And actually, we invested in Giant Protocol. And this is the CEO and founder of Giant Protocol, Suruchi Gupta. So I'll have her introduce herself. Suruchi, tell us a little bit about yourself.
First and foremost, thanks for having me. Miko, thanks for coming on stage and doing this together. My name is Suruchi Gupta, and I'm the founder and CEO of Giant Protocol. At Giant, we're turning bandwidth into a globally tradable digital asset so that all of us can buy, sell, trade, connectivity, or bandwidth contracts anywhere in the world. Now, my background is that I am originally from India. I was born and brought up in Mumbai. And then I came to the US for my master's in computer science. And then after that, I had this unique opportunity to work at Juniper Networks for a while. I was a technical lead over there, and I got this very fantastic opportunity to cross-functionally work with 5 different teams and just learn about how networking infrastructure works, how internet works behind the scenes. Around the same time, I started participating in a bunch of hackathons. The whole idea being I wanted to validate all these problems I was facing and wanted to test their business potential. So presented the idea for the precursor for Giant at one of those hackathons, which was organized by Tata Communications. And Tata Communications is one of the largest infrastructure providers in the world. 1/3 of all internet traffic actually passes through Tata Communications' infrastructure. So we were declared as a global prize winner at the hackathon. And after winning the hackathon, we actually became the only team to have then gotten incubated by them. And so that's really how my journey began. But it really started from a very silly problem that I wanted to solve, which was I hated paying overage fees to AT&T. And I was like, hey, why is there no way for me to just buy and sell data from each other? I'm happy to pay for incremental data, but I wasn't willing to pay for the overage fees that they kept charging every now and then. So couldn't find a solution, decided to pitch it at the hackathon, won the hackathon, and that's really how the journey actually began.
So as a venture capital person and as an investor in Suruchi, like my mindset is really looking for dissatisfaction, right? Which is, to me, like I want to find a dissatisfaction that affects a large number of people, and I want the dissatisfaction to be very, very high, right? So the thing that's amazing is if you think about the size of the internet, right? The size of the internet is now something like 5 billion humans, right? And actually the size of the mobile internet is actually most of the size of the internet, right? So mobile data and mobile internet is like gigantic, right? And the thing that's amazing is how dissatisfying our experience is, and I think that the dissatisfaction she's describing was definitely something I felt personally, and I think has been felt by billions of people, right? So in a sense, this idea of making bandwidth into a currency, right, and into a tradable currency, and in a blockchain cryptocurrency, right, I think really struck me. But the thing that's so important in my role is not the idea, because actually in my business, venture capital, ideas are really cheap, right? The thing that's really, really, really scarce and rare is talent, right? So the thing that was really amazing is I made my investment decision really at the first time I met Suruchi. We met in a Starbucks, and as soon as I heard her talk, I basically was like, okay, I need to support this entrepreneur. So I was very excited about that, and I think that while the idea she has is very large, I think it's a very interesting person here, and I think that part of it is that she has a lot of excitement for solving this problem. So Suruchi, maybe you can tell us about kind of how you experience this problem of, and how did you come up with this idea? What was the core?
Yeah, so it started from when I was a student and had just moved to the US, and I hated paying overage fees to AT&T. And what I always kept doing was just kept my data completely turned off towards the end of the billing cycle renewal. so that I wouldn't be charged the overage fees. And then I kept on doing that multiple times where I would just rely on Wi-Fi all the time. And then when I would go to see my friends, the first thing I would ask them is, hey, what's your Wi-Fi password? Without bothering to ask them how are they doing or how is everything going on. So that just earned me a very silly nickname, which is called Chindi in Hindi, which means stingy. And that just frustrated the hell out of me. And I was like, gosh, there has to be a better way. Why can't we just buy and sell data? And then I saw this over provisioning of network. So the point was that when we are like anywhere we go, we see these dozens of Wi-Fi hotspots that are everywhere. And then on the other hand, I had a bunch of friends that had unlimited data plans. So I was like, there's this massive underutilized capacity, but there's just no simple way for us to buy and sell and trade this capacity. So why is there no solution for that? So that was actually like earning the silly nickname was quite frustrating and motivating to in fact go find a solution to this problem. And at the same time I saw that there was this massive over provisioning of networks and capacity, and so there was an opportunity where we could create a more open efficient network, and that was what we decided to follow and pursue.
One of the greatest patterns in venture capital is this idea of feel the pain, cure the pain, right? So if you feel the pain in your heart, right? Like if your friends are calling you stingy, like, you really feel, and in a way, one of the deepest motivations for entrepreneurship is actually almost like revenge, right? And Mark Andreessen's Twitter feed, someone asked him, what motivates you, right, to build A16Z, this huge venture capital firm? And his one-word answer was revenge. Like, that's what drives him, right? And so in a sense, this feeling of the pain and having the pain, I think, is very deep. So I'm really curious, like, how is it going, right? Like, how is your project, what's happening, and like, where are we in your entrepreneur journey?
Right. So it started from that silly problem, and then as we dug deep into it, we realized, well, it's a massive systemic problem. Because if we think about how internet actually works today, there are only 3 or 4 providers in every geography that have that quasi-monopoly, and us as consumers have no bargaining power. And I was like, why is it like that? How can we actually change that where we are able to create a more open and inclusive internet that is owned and governed by all of us? So on one hand, it became this massive systemic problem, but then on the other hand, when you think about how do you actually solve it, because it's a massive coordination problem where you need to really bring all these large telecoms and large behemoths along with you. So we realized that it was actually an incentive problem. So we set out to create a new incentive layer such that we could actually bring these large providers along with us and build it in a more like positive sum manner and not really a zero-sum manner, where on one hand, these providers come along, and at the same time, it is community-owned and governed. So with that, that's basically what we are creating with Giant Protocol, where on one hand, we are creating liquid markets for bandwidth, so that all of us can now buy, sell, trade, connectivity, or capacity contracts anywhere in the world. And on the other hand, we're also making it an investable asset. So the two together, and what we've managed to do so far is today if you're traveling internationally, you can actually buy, sell, trade tokenized eSIMs anywhere in the world in over 200 plus countries. The way we do that is in collaboration with some of the large telecom operators globally that have this excess capacity or underutilized capacity available. Like there is actually more than $500 billion worth of capacity that is underutilized on an annual basis. But there is no liquid market for it. So Giant is actually creating that liquid market which doesn't exist for this unused capacity. And so we partner up with these providers, help them turn their unused capacity or even future capacity into tokenized contracts so that they act like NFTs on chain. And these eSIM NFTs can then be traded by investors, institutions, enterprises so that they can earn a low risk, stable yield, which is really coming from a percentage of the provider sales. And I'm giving a very, very high level overview of how these mechanisms actually work. But the idea is we get this excess capacity from the providers. Those are turned into tokenized contracts that are then represented as NFTs on chain, which anyone can now buy, sell, trade anywhere. And by virtue of them buying and selling and trading, they also now get to invest in a new asset class.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then ultimately, these contracts are then made available to the consumers.
Yeah, so what I wanted to do here, though, is I wanted to ground the conversation a bit, because part of what entrepreneurship is and venture is really what I call heaven and earth, right? And heaven is the grand vision and the dream and the scope, right? But obviously earth has to do with execution, right? And I think to me, like, my original question was really on the earth, right? Which is, I just wanted to make it 100% clear that this is a shipping product that consumers can and are buying, right? And I just want to get maybe some numbers that will help people understand, like, how real this is, and rather it's not just a dream. Because I think there's actually many, many kind of bandwidth dreams that people are selling. But I think bandwidth reality is more interesting. So I'd love to hear what the reality is and what the numbers are.
This is the QR code. Actually, everyone can scan this QR code and download our app right now and actually use it anywhere in over 200 plus countries to experience how real it is. And when you actually use it, you'll not even realize that you're using a tokenized eSIM or it's a blockchain protocol. It just works as a normal application that would allow you to get connected to internet anywhere in the world.
Yeah, so that to me is part of what I get excited about, obviously, is that, you know, really the tactical execution and really shipping products, right? So that's the kind of dream. So I'm really excited about that. So I guess my question is in terms of roadmap, right? So now that you have like really big partnerships, you have a shipping product, you have like, where do we go from here?
Yeah, so that is what, so we would actually like to turn these tokenized eSIMs into cross-chain assets. Because the way we envision bandwidth becoming an asset is, imagine these tokenized eSIMs now acting like new financial primitives, so that you could then think about using bandwidth as a form of payment, bandwidth as a form of collateral, us being able to trade a US Verizon or AT&T contract with a Vodafone UK contract. So things of that nature can we can start building those applications on top of this new like digital assets in the form of tokenized eSIMs that we are bringing on chain, which until now was never possible before. So that's where we would love to, you know, invite traders or traders that can actually provide liquidity for these contracts, as well as developers that would like to help us turn these tokenized eSIMs into cross-chain assets on multiple different chains.
I'm very interested in your ideal customer profile from an end user perspective, because one of the exciting things that I'm watching is the development of mobile payments in the African continent, right? Like M-Pesa, and the use of mobile minutes as a currency, right? So as mobile minutes become a cryptocurrency, like how do you see markets and how do you see users? Like what is the future?
Sure. So in our case, since we chose to specifically start with eSIMs, so we are certainly tagging along with where the eSIM compatible devices adoption is. So even though, of course, the goal is for this to be a massive, you know, global play, but we are initially focusing on more of developed markets where eSIM adoption is already pretty significant, and users want, you know, flexibility in terms of being able to use, being able to not be locked with any single provider, but being able to use internet on demand, on the fly. So our target audience is actually, crypto community, which is very big on the ethos of ownership and having, you know, bargaining power and flexibility. So that is what Giant is all about. So our target audience is certainly crypto community, as well as travelers that are traveling internationally. and want to stay connected on the fly.
Yes, and in terms of international travelers, do they need to know anything at all about crypto?
They don't.
Yeah, that's great. So, obviously it's open to the world. How do you see the future of this, though? Like, maybe we can go back to the big dream and the big picture. Like, how do you see this growing?
Yeah, so when you think about it, like when when I think about internet, to me it's like I fundamentally believe it should be a basic human right and owned and governed by all of us. Yet it's an extremely hard problem to solve when it comes to coordinating across all these different telcos. So in Giant's case, what we set out to do is on one hand not only make it a liquid market, but at the same time also make it an open market such that it is owned and governed by all of us. So our vision is to really like onboard billions of internet users that are already using internet, and just by using internet become owners in this new connectivity economy, like we like to call it, through Giant, where imagine, just by using internet, you get, so the way it already works today is that, let's say you buy a $10 contract. At the expiry of that $10 contract, you are rewarded in Giant tokens. So you get 40% of that back in Giant tokens, which gets auto deposited or auto staked into a provider pool, which is specific to the provider from whom you have bought it. So let's say there is a separate pool for AT&T, there's a separate pool for T-Mobile. So that gets auto deposited into that pool. And from that pool, because now you as a consumer become automatically a staker, you're actually helping secure the ledger, as well as at the same time you are guaranteeing the delivery of the contract. That is why you earn additional 13% APY plus 5% of sales. So just by using internet, you automatically become a part of this ecosystem and this economy. So our vision is to really actually make internet owned and governed by billions of internet users, as it should be.
Yeah, so this to me is foundational, and it connects with the ethos of Ethereum and the ethos of decentralization, which is that the idea, what she's describing, is when you really look at bandwidth at its core, we're really talking about electromagnetic spectra. We're talking about light that's kind of in the air, right? So effectively, the idea that this is a public good that effectively can be owned by the people in a decentralized way, and that the benefits of ownership include the yield, right? Which is that they become owners of this open spectrum, and that the owners actually get the yield from the benefits of ownership, right? Which is really, truly, I think, participating in kind of the creation of this sort of much more democratized future. So I'm very excited about that. I guess, do you have any closing notes? I think we have about a minute left in this session.
Well, I would say check out Giant. Please share any feedback you all have. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, on Telegram. I don't have that there, but my Telegram is Suruchi GP. Feel free to connect on Telegram. Would love to hear from everyone.
Yeah, fantastic. And, it's a small crowd, so like if any of you kind of want to have a chat, I'm sure Suruchi can make herself available over here immediately after this session. So, really great to see you all out here. We do have really nice sessions here on the choral stage upcoming. So, I think the next session, will come to you soon. Actually, one of the great things is that we have a little bit of bonus time. So, with our bonus time, I wouldn't mind actually throwing out to an audience question. So we don't have audience mics, but I'd love to if you can shout out. Yes. So the question was, is Giant planning to be publicly traded on an exchange? So I'll leave that one to Suruchi.
Yeah. So the idea with Giant token is that we think of it as representing a unit of value for bandwidth globally. So certainly, once there is enough liquidity for the contracts on chain, that's when we plan to consider listing. Yeah.
Yes, and without letting too many cats out of too many bags, there are some fairly exciting, as yet unannounced partnerships that I think will be extremely exciting to hear about. So I'm definitely pumped up for this. I do think that realizing this vision is actually of huge scope. And one of the amazing things that excites me is that there are so many countries with so many carriers, and that the number of people affected can be literally billions of people can be affected. So, you know, the scope of this is very, very grand. So I guess, you know, I'd love to, do you have any further comment, or should I have another question?
I think we can just ask any other questions.
Yeah, let's take another question. Does anyone have another question? Yes, sir. I'm sorry?
Say that again.
Bigger current providers and partners? Bigger current providers and partners?
I see.
Globally?
Yeah. So I think he's asking for us to list the providers and partners. I do think this is that it may be okay, like we don't want to pre-announce any major partnerships, but I think you can talk about the networks that people can connect to in the app.
Sure. So in the app, if you go, you can already use that in over 200 plus countries. And when you actually look at every contract that is available, there is the network name already listed. So the underlying provider that you would be connecting to, whether it's T-Mobile or whether it's AT&T, is actually listed. So the way we managed to do that was through some large collaborations with key partners. And now we are gearing up to actually announce some very, very big partnerships, as Miko mentioned. Can't announce them just yet, so you all will have to stay tuned. But certainly massive partnerships, which aren't easy to pull off. So.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time. I think one of the things that's really amazing has to do with business timing. So I'd actually love, Suruchi, for you to comment a bit about the timing of this, and kind of like, what is your view about the timing of the readiness of telco partners, and kind of how is the industry receiving these ideas?
Right. So I think even 2 years back, when we would have talked about this idea of turning bandwidth into a new asset class, nobody was getting it. But now, thanks to, of course, the real-world assets space picking up, tokenization of real-world assets already happening when it comes to BCG putting out this report that $16 trillion worth of assets are going to be tokenized by 2030. And of that, about 40% are going to be previously illiquid markets. So there is obviously industry support that is now starting to become available. And then at the same time, particularly for bandwidth, why I think it is right now this unique moment in time and history for it to actually exist is because of several, 4 or 5 reasons. Like, number one is that, as we started, bandwidth already has massive demand. It's like trillions of dollars are already spent by more than 5 billion of us on an annual basis. That's number one. It already has a huge demand. Second is that it is durable. Unlike a lot of other assets, it's actually backed by physical infrastructure. Third is that it actually has limited supply. So in the short term, it is limited in supply, so it also has scarcity value. The fourth is that in the long term, though, it is elastic, which is also a good thing because it can be expandable, and you can increase it from medium to long term. And then lastly, thanks to eSIM, it is for the first time now becoming digitally possible to transfer and track bandwidth contracts. So there are these key reasons, and of course, thanks to blockchain, tokenization, NFTs, DeFi, all of that. But it's certainly these key reasons that actually make turning bandwidth as a new asset class the right timing at the moment. And we see it as a massive real opportunity to go after at the moment.
So one of the really interesting implications of turning bandwidth into a on-chain real-world asset, a digital asset, is really the extent to which telecommunications companies that are the providers effectively become almost government level and almost bank level, in the sense that they're the producers of the asset, right? So they effectively mint bandwidth, right? As well as the ability for them to monetize and supply monetary financial services to their own customers, right? So I'm really curious your perspective on how telcos can view themselves as banks, and what's going to happen to effectively banking a class of individuals who may have a phone but they may not even have a bank account.
Right, so I think that was one of the key things that we had to actually crack, which was, hey, when we are talking about creating this new incentive layer, how do we actually bring these large telecom operators along? And so that is where we saw this opportunity of there being massive underutilized capacity in the form of, about like more than 25% of capacity on an annual basis is underutilized, which is about $500 billion worth of capacity that is underutilized. And at the same time, they are constantly building that capacity, for which also capital is required. So that's why the model that we created was, hey, you already have this excess capacity, and then there is also the future capacity that is available. How about you made that available to us? We can, then tokenize that capacity in the form of digital assets and then make it liquid and tradable. So that was one key piece of this, where now this passive asset that was on their books actually becomes a tradable asset, which means they can actually get paid for that capacity a lot sooner than what they would otherwise make.
So one of the questions that I have is that you described bandwidth as a durable asset, right? And obviously tokenized bandwidth has the quality of durability in the sense that you can transfer the tokens, right? And then you can effectively like redeem them, right? So the idea becomes, if you're banking a token, let's say you're banking 10 giant tokens, right? So maybe when you travel, you can spend them, right? So you spend them elsewhere. So the creation of a digital asset for bandwidth makes it durable, but it's really durable in a virtual sense, right? Because when you think about the underlying asset is effectively perishable, right? Because if someone has an undersea optical fiber cable, right, then they're either using the cable or they're not, and if they don't use the cable, they can't redeem the money and get the usage back in a time machine, right? Like it's gone, right? So
exactly.
It's similar to like a hotel room, right? Where the hotel room, if it's vacant, right, then the hotel doesn't make money, right? So in a sense, I guess I'm wondering how you look at this distinction of kind of durability and impermanence.
So I think the durability aspect of it is what makes it interesting when it is compared with other assets, where it's like we talk about a lot of assets where is there real value there. So in this case, because it is backed by physical infrastructure, it just makes it a lot more valuable from that standpoint, because it is backed by physical infrastructure. Now, in case of the impermanency, you're right that yes, this capacity is available. If it is actually not utilized, then it is just lying in there, right? It is ideal. And the interesting thing from a telco's point of view is that the marginal cost for them to actually like distribute or make another gigabyte available is lot less. So in fact, they would rather, be happy with being able to sell as little or as much as possible of this ideal capacity. And today it is just made available through bespoke contracts, and there is no open market that is available. So in a sense, us making that open market for this idle capacity is just accretive.
Yeah, that's exciting. I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Which is, if you have, like, one of the foundational things that I've learned about things like Bitcoin tech is that basically energy of any kind, including financial energy, doesn't want to just sit there, right? So this idea of having a store of value, like storing it is fine, but as soon as you store something, it kind of gets itchy, like it wants to move around, right? So in a sense, the idea becomes that if you've banked mobile data, right, now that you're just sitting there, it's kind of burning a hole in your pocket, right? Like you kind of want to spend it, right? So if you're on an airplane and all of a sudden it says, oh, do you want to connect the airplane Wi-Fi? It's just going to cost you some points,
Yep.
right, you may just choose to do so. So I think that the idea that this asset is accretive and it's just additional and it's sort of, it's there to be used, right? So I think that's an exciting propensity. It may change the behavior of users.
Definitely. And in fact, today also, in our case, when we are making these contracts available, when anyone is buying that contract, they actually have 180 days to activate. So meaning at any point in time in the 180 days, you could trade it, you could transfer it, you could also use that as collateral. So there are all these additional, use cases that become possible. So you may now consider, buying this capacity lot sooner than what you would otherwise do if you were only buying it for consumption purposes. So that's where, of course, from a telco's point of view, they are then able to make more money by actually making it available on the platform.
Yeah, that's exciting. And I guess one of the things I'm wondering about the roadmap, at the risk of being a when token guy, is what is the time frame for sort of a publicly available token?
So I think, in our case, we've been very, very focused on actually making sure that we focus on the right things, which is bringing liquidity for the contracts first and foremost. Once we reach tens of millions in liquidity for the contract, after that is when, we would consider answering the question of when token.
I like that.
So right now, we are focused on bringing liquidity for the contracts itself.
Yeah, but I do think that it's a very exciting mindset, right? Because ultimately, the thing that I love the most about entrepreneurs who kind of have felt the pain themselves is that they're really focused on building solutions. And I really feel like, in a sense, that's one of the most important things for our space, which is that the more we go into the world and we solve real problems for real people, the better our industry becomes, right? So really, I think, we really need builders like Suruchi who kind of are not necessarily thinking about this as kind of a token money grab, but really thinking about this as like, how do we solve real problems for people, right? And how do we prevent people from being called stingy because they want to connect to the internet? Any closing thoughts?
Well, I think I had a lot of fun
That's great.
having this conversation with you, Miko. Thank you to all of y'all for actually joining, coming like this early to actually attend the conversation. So thanks a lot for that. Looking forward to seeing all of y'all using Giant and actually sending feedback and critique as well. Please do. Just open to hearing everyone's thoughts. And hopefully, some of y'all also help turn this into cross-chain assets across different chains. Thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, big hand with Suruchi, Giant Protocol. Thank you so much. You guys have been awesome.
Yep.
All right, so I think we're actually moving on to our next session. So we do have